All right, Gabriel, thank you for joining us today. So, as a start off, can you give us a quick introduction about yourself and your background?
Sure, I've been in the security space for many years. Prior to Wizer, which is a security awareness company, then we're going to talk today a lot about citizens and security. But before that, I founded another company called Observe It. This is what I've been doing for the past almost 14 years, and we were dealing with insider threat, and it's basically what people are doing inside the company. And the threats are not necessarily malicious. A lot of those threats were unintentional, but still they put the business at sort of the same risk in many times. So from there, we sold it recently to Proofpoint about half a year ago. And for me, it was a natural shift to take it from monitoring what people are doing and able to do to educate them how to avoid doing that in the first place. So it was just a natural progress for me.
Right. So it
And
was it was a natural progression as you wanted a new challenge to look at like how can you add the most value in the world right now, and you noticed the shift between corporate to kind of citizen as there being a
yeah,
big lack of understanding.
yeah, because people do stuff, and in most cases, some people say they don't care, but I don't think they don't care. They're just not aware.
Yeah.
So, and you can see that and the reason I say they do care is because they do the same on their personal life. Like, it's not that they don't care about their bank account or about their social media account. They're just not aware to the risks. So if they're not aware to the risk on their personal life, why would they be aware of the risks in the company?
Mm.
So you see all those things they do, and you understand that we spend so much money on technology, but there's so many, technology is limited in the amount of things that it can detect or stop. And you really have to educate people if you want to have a chance even in fighting cybercrime.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's a cliche, but we are the weakest link when it comes to prevention
Or
of
the strongest
cybercrime.
link. It depends on,
Well, yes, indeed, yeah, you are. I mean, I think most of the manual hacks that we've experienced they've all got a dupe to them, meaning that you're trying to trick or encourage the less informed necessarily to
yeah.
click or do something. So they think they're like you say, it's not a malice act.
Hmm.
It's they've been conned. They've been duped into doing something they
I
shouldn't
love
do.
that word. Yeah, going back to how to communicate with people. I think one of the things that we lack is the industry is the terminology, how we talk. And when you
Mm,
talk to a person about a data breach, it sounds far-fetched for them. For many, what
yes.
is a data breach? I never had a data breach in my personal life, but things like they've been conned, they've been scammed. This is the type of language that I
Mm.
think we should start talking to people about, to talk to people. It's
I
not.
think yeah, I think you make a very good point. I think terminology plays a huge factor when it comes to people feeling that they understand what what you're talking about. So everyone knows what a pickpocket is. The just
Yeah,
difference is that they're not picking your actual pocket. They're likely trying to pick your virtual
yeah,
wallet. But the analogy is and the result is the same. It's just the
yeah.
landscape to which it's done now is very different.
Look, technology may change,
Sure.
but human nature stays the same. So we've seen, pickpockets, and they're using eventually the same methods just online.
Yeah.
But deception, basically, we're talking about deception. And when it was in the physical world, we can pick up cues, right? We can pick up things, our gut feeling says, don't walk in that, dark, shady place.
Yes.
But when it's online, we cannot pick up body language. So deception works better in cyber
Yeah.
than in real life.
Yeah, it's certainly much like email. It's very hard to get tonality or sarcasm, but you're right. It's also very hard to get intent. Like
Yeah,
we would feel that, and it's wrong, but as you say, a dark alley, shady character, somebody who you've never seen before.
yeah,
These are all factors that fall away when it comes to online safety.
yeah.
An email from someone genuine, an email from somebody non-genuine. It's sometimes very challenging to spot the
Yeah,
difference.
they look the same, right?
Yeah, they do. Well, that's what they're trying to do. That's why it works.
Yeah. And yeah, it's they don't even try too hard. That's what, that's what worries me when I
Yeah.
look at some of those. The Nigerian prince email is still going, and you would say, like, who would click on that?
Yeah.
But apparently people do.
Numbers game, right?
So they don't try hard, and that just shows you the economics of cyber crime, that it's just so easy. Just imagine what happens when they start to picking up their game.
When they
Right
really
now
try.
there's so many low-hanging fruits out there.
Yeah. We termed this podcast citizen cyber safety, and it's very interesting. We spend a lot of our time here at Node looking at corporate cyber safety, and we're very shortly looking and launching a citizen related, so personal or citizen being the same phrase. In 2020, what are you seeing, or what are you identifying are the largest non-corporate, so citizen related threats that are out there that people should be looking out for?
So we need to understand how cyber criminals think. And I usually say they think like marketers. Basically, they target the trending topics, right? So if right now work from home is a trending topic and there's a concern around that, or coronavirus, or jobs, all of those things are things they target because they want a high click-through rate, right? They want eventually people to respond. So they're always targeting the most trending topics. So job scams is a big one, where people apply to jobs from job sites. They look legit, like in Indeed.com. They see a job, they apply, they even get an interview, and they get accepted. So they're like all happy, and that job, that basically was a fraud. It was not a real job offering. So you now got accepted, and you provide all your personal information, bank details, social security number to that fake employer. So first of all, your identity is stolen as easy as that. So you apply for a job, you put all that information in, and there's no job behind it. But it continues where that employer now tells you, okay, we want you to work from home. We're going to send you a check, for example, to buy, equipment like a computer or different things. So you get the check in the mail, you're happy, you deposit that check, and you go online and you buy, from the approved vendors, you buy the computer, but that all fake. So now you're also depositing a check that will bounce probably within a week or 3 weeks. And meanwhile, you're using your credit card to buy all those, computer and stuff. So you got scammed twice. One, your identity was stolen. And second, your money was stolen. And we're seeing, it's more common now just because people are looking for jobs where they can work from home. So everything makes sense. Yes. So that's something that unfortunately 2020 is cyber criminals are just going after the things people worry about.
So is it fair to say that identity theft is the be all and is always or mainly the end result of what you?
Well, in this case, it's 2 in 1, right? So you get an identity theft and you make a few $1,000 out of people's that you scammed. So,
before they catch on, and obviously.
But even if they catch on, they put in their credit card. So it's not like their credit card was stolen.
Yes.
They actually, put that. So it's hard to dispute it later because
the credit card company will say, well,
you did it.
We've not done anything wrong. You can, the best bet is to try and return the goods, but it's hugely inconvenient. Yeah. And I think that leads us, certainly the way we're thinking. It's sort of like it's when it happens, like, what do you do? There's nobody that really fights your corner. You're left then to try and unravel the identity theft for yourself, which is massively hard and fraught with challenges. And actually, that's why the product that we're looking to launch is going to assist people in doing so, because we feel certainly there's a big hole in that circumstance. Because how, sort of moving topics, like, how do you think law enforcement and regulatory bodies are managing this, or maybe not managing this?
Well, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
So we're
So,
seeing the battlefield has changed from the street or from tanks
mm,
to the cyber. So first of all, that happened faster than what law enforcement, because they have to invest in infrastructure in order to now shift their attention to cyber.
mm,
So that takes time. So first of
sure.
all, yeah, they're doing the best they can, but unlike in the physical world where the threat is more tangible, it's more, you can see it. In
Mm.
online, it's just harder.
Well,
So I
I think
think,
online as well, it crosses many borders. That could be state borders, which are easier, but when it moves into different country borders,
yeah,
by the
yeah, we can
time,
see that because there's,
yeah,
you can, for example, there are scam centers, for example, in India and other places. But in order for them to get prosecuted, there has to be a victim. Now, the victim is not in India, that the victim is in the US. So if you arrest them, who's going to sue them? Like, who is the
yeah,
victim?
yeah,
It's not a local thing, it's an
yeah.
international thing. So now you have to bring the victim from the
Mm,
US, from a different country, to prosecute them. That's so difficult.
yeah,
So like you said, it's become a global crime. And in general, the expectation for crime to go away is irrational, right? Like we cannot solve crime, physical crime as well. We just can't solve it. We cannot just eradicate it. So we can also not expect to eradicate cybercrime altogether. It's just an irrational expectation.
mm,
But it's even harder in cyber because, like you said, it's global.
yeah.
The way regulations work and the way law enforcement works all over the globe is not optimized for international crime. Um,
I think as well that they would deem it to be a low-level crime. We in England we have a phrase called a petty crime, but certainly crime through identification theft wouldn't be on the same level as a murder or.
yeah.
And
But
I
the thing
think,
is, it helps for all the others. So identity theft, people need to understand why identity theft. In the US, for example, this may surprise some people, but the identities that are worth the most are kids' identities. So there is about 1 million kids' identities being stolen in the US, and they're worth the most for cyber criminals because they don't have a credit score yet. You can
yeah,
take that identity that is basically empty, it's
yeah,
clean, and you can create a new identity on top of that identity. So now you can start an open bank accounts and you won't get detected because until that kid turns 18 or whatever age that
mm,
they start to apply for credit, they will never know about it. And just for people to understand, like identity theft is such a basic tool for thieves because if you're about to steal, you're better off not using your own identity, right? So like you want to use someone else.
of
So
course,
you need identities. You
yeah,
need other people's identities because being anonymous doesn't mean not having an identity. It means not being yourself.
yeah.
So
So actually, it means like having many identities, none of which are yourself.
exactly.
It's
So you need them. That's like a
yeah,
basic thing you need
yeah,
to steal. So for cybercrime to grow, they need those identities. And the last thing you want to have is you don't want to be accused of doing something that you have never done, but you'll have
mm,
to eventually prove that it's not you because there's no other system, right?
yeah.
Like, we cannot just believe you that it's not you. So the more
And
identities
I
that are out there, and those identities are cheap, by the way. Like they're selling them, sometimes by the cents, just to show
wow,
you, like it's just something that there's so many out there. If you look at, for
mm,
example, have I been pwned or other websites,
yeah,
there are overall, I think, like 9 billion emails and passwords out there that have
yeah,
been
yeah.
stolen.
We and we testament to that. I mean, we do a lot of work in that space. We do use certain sets of databases to look up our insured and our clients, whether they have been compromised. Within our new ID theft solution, we're actually also tracking their children credentials to see if anyone's opening credit, just as you mentioned. But we certainly haven't heard the statistic being quite as high as you mentioned. So that's certainly something that people should really be thinking about.
It's just easier to go with that identity for so long versus.
Well, yeah, it makes sense.
Again, it's like cyber criminals think like a business. It's an operational risk, like how often do you need to change an identity? How often do you need to buy a new domain? How often? So things like kids' identity just can stay longer. So from an operational point of view, it's better.
Yeah, that's scary. It's a scary but a very, very real point.
And it's going to grow, right? Like I don't see this shrinking, unfortunately. It's
no.
It's also like Bitcoin.
Here's something
right?
that I was
Bitcoins. It's a tool to transfer money, or identity is a tool to log in or steal on behalf of someone else. And then you have Bitcoin as a method to transfer money. These are tools that cybercrime uses.
Yeah. And I think that unfortunately in the modern world, corporations or commerce, not necessarily corporations, everybody, commerce, communication has all lent into this, and they should, because on the whole it's fantastic. No one would say different. But unfortunately now you can't not open a bank account without an email address or an identity of sorts. So by default, you have to give over your ID. Now, if you think how many times you give over your ID or your loved one's IDs electronically in any year, from school through website, through everything is done online now. And actually, I think one of the things that we see most of, that they're not doing a great job of maintaining your interest. So if you look at governments, financial institutions, corporations, social networks, they all lose or mishandle your data. So what we're thinking as a company is that we're trying to fight back in the say that you can't rely on regulatory frameworks, corporations, social networks, etc., to look after your best interest when it comes to your online identity and your loved ones, your family's online identity. But also, in some ways, you've got to take responsibility for it and either partner with somebody, take some interest in it. Certainly look at a service that we're looking to bring to fruition. But this isn't a sales pitch. This is genuine. Like I genuinely think that the days of relying on others for your identity, your digital identity, and your loved ones' sort of digital well-being is over. I think it's time.
Look, unfortunately, we are at, they used to say like trust and verify. Today, it's don't trust and verify. You cannot assume anything. You see an ad on Facebook, that doesn't mean that they vetted it out. Like so many scams are on social media. If cyber criminals can spin up shops, can put an ad, they can compete with unrealistic discounts. People click on it, buy, and they either never get anything or they get just crap, which is still fraud. Like you expected what was in description and you got something totally else.
We've seen that with COVID-19 particularly, where we're very aware of, we work with some threat intelligence agencies that give us and assist us with our threat monitoring, and they were telling us only a few weeks ago they're tracking 80,000 COVID-19 branded known fake assets, i.e. fake websites that are claiming to sell tests, claiming to sell all sorts. And you make a very interesting point. I think it's a really good point to take away, that they pry on the trends and the time of the year. So things that are in the media, COVID-19, we've seen it with in corporate world, we've seen it where if it's coming up to the tax year, wages, those sort of things are definitely where we see the perpetrator, the bad actors, mirroring and understanding those sort of timelines to try and increase. And as you say, complete scattergun.
Look, they follow the trends. It's a business. They need to market themselves. Their product is scamming you. So now they need to create a pipeline, to create a funnel, to collect leads. Eventually, they follow the sales process. They qualify. They also don't want to fool people that will eventually take too much of their resources and will never pay. That's why we see sometimes grammar mistakes, because they qualify and they want to only have the gullible people. Like if it's too good.
Yeah, I saw you mention that on an earlier post, and I was like, that is so interesting. That is such.
Because once you understand they think like a business, you have to understand that if they send out 50 million emails, they'll get a lot of responses. They need to filter them out. They need to filter their noise out. How do you do that? So eventually they operate like any other business. And if you look at some of the scam centers, you can see that they come to work, sit in a cubicle, they have, a manager, you can see that during the lunchtime, there are less scams. It's just like they take a break. When they take a break, less scam calls.
Even
just
the scammer needs a coffee break now and then.
Look at the different regions in the world, correlate lunch break with scam calls, and you'll see.
Crazy.
It's crazy.
It is. And I find it both crazy and fascinating in the same breath. That's why we do these podcast chats with people like yourselves, because it's really scratching my own itch. And I do find that the whole nearly legitimacy of how they operate. They've got an office, like you say, they've got a funnel, they've got a CRM, they use an outboarding, data dump mail blast, and then they look at the best results to kind of drill down into the prospects. And I'm sure then that goes into
and they use the regular tools, by the way. It's not like they have scammer tools, right? They're using a regular CRM.
Well, I didn't want to name any, but I was thinking, I wonder if the more popular ones are used. And then that kind of leads me on to, I was thinking before we came on that, do you think, and I think the answer to this will be yes, but certainly from your standpoint, it's on the increase. It's not slowing down. If anything, it's getting worse, i.e. it's getting more prevalent.
Yeah, we spoke about it. Crime is shifting online. And like I said earlier, the fact that we see the Nigerian prince still going on, it means that we're just at the beginning. People are still unaware in the masses. And you can see that those scammers don't even invest a lot, on the mass scale. There are still a lot of scammers and cyber criminals that are just copy pasting old ones because it works. So if it's that easy, if you can still make money out of copying, scam emails from 5 years ago, 6 years ago, what does it say about the future? That what happens if they take up a notch, pick it up a notch, start adding sophistication. So I'm still seeing so many low-hanging fruits from their point of view. And I think once we're done with that and then start to, add sophistication.
Well, and I think with sophistication comes scale.
Yeah.
They can do more.
They will optimize.
Yeah.
So right now there's a lot of farmers out there, just, collecting. And of course it's a pyramid, there are the more sophisticated cyber criminals that are, spear phishing, attacking banks, and they're more focused and they know better what they're doing. But once that lower level starts to advance, then if we're not prepared, it's a lost battle.
Yeah, and I think it's very difficult for families, depending on your background, what you understand about the internet, or how long you've raised. I mean, we're probably only third generation, maybe third generation raising children in the digital age. And we're just talking about really identity theft today, but there's a whole raft of other challenges that we're certainly looking at when we roll out a product in this space that is very much a family well-being product. And some of your resources are very, when it comes to gaming and sexting and social interaction, and knowing as parents, as adults, how best to handle those certain circumstances. The online world is incredible, but it can be incredibly damaging and it escalates very quickly if you don't have someone to turn to, I think, or possibly a team of people that could advise you in a multitude of different situations.
I'll give you an example. Like recently there was a mass email going out, a sextortion email, basically telling, and it hit kids as well. So imagine you're a kid, 15, 16-year-old, you're getting an email that says that they connected to your webcam, they recorded you doing stuff, and they even have your password. They show your password in the email. Maybe it's an old password from a website that was hacked. If you don't know who to go to, you freak out.
Yeah.
You're a 16-year-old. They tell you that they will publish all those videos and pictures to all your friends.
Yeah.
You go to your parents. They don't know what to do with this. Like, they get freaked out. And it's not even real, right? Like, all of this is like, we're talking about fake news, but this is like fake. You don't even have to actually hack someone.
That's the problem with fake news. It's only fake if you know it's fake, right?
Yeah. So why, just look at where we're progressing, where you don't even have to hack. You just need to claim you know something. You need, perception is reality.
Yeah.
So now, if you're not educating your kids about this, and if they come to you freaking out and you don't know what to do, who do you go to?
Yeah,
so
it's a and we very sadly have seen some horrendous, very, very sad results of these types of events here in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same worldwide, where we've even seen it then escalate into teen suicide and self-harming, and these don't become known until it's too late. And as you say, I mean, it's such a helpless position to be in. And we definitely like the fact that our solution is there for the cyber well-being, for the difficult times when things like this come to light, because it's as you say, it's a very scary world, and knowing what to do is critical, and you're not gonna have that sort of support terribly easily, and you can make the wrong calls, and it can result in a very negative.
Just like we teach our kids how to cross the road safely, we have to do the same with cyber. Kids maybe are much more advanced than parents in terms of technology, but in terms of maturity, they're not. So, and social engineering is not about technology. Social engineering, and I think that's the disconnect. Parents usually say, hey, don't talk to strangers. Yeah, that's one thing, but we're more than that right now. We need to talk about social engineering and how people can fool you, and how a sextortion email is just a scam, or if you get an email from your teacher, it's maybe not your teacher. So all of those things kids need to learn, because
it's a really good, and I love that analogy that we refer to for our children. Like, we call it, sort of stranger danger is a very common phrase spoken about in schools. And it's interesting when you say that, because, and we spoke about it earlier, about how emails are faceless. You can't tell whether an email is from somebody you know or somebody you think you know, and it's very easy, as you know, to manipulate emails.
You can spoof them today. You can.
Oh, it's easy, yeah, and that's just that. We've mentioned earlier that the scary thing is how easy it is to do, and we touched on that on an earlier podcast. But it's the ease to in which it is to do these types of activities that makes it such a prolific thing to try and prevent. One of the things that I always like to do with a guest is to ask them where they think in their particular landscape the world will be in 5 years' time. Where do you think? And it's a very everyone does the same intake of breath. I apologize, but like where? I mean, where?
It's an interesting question, which I'll be honest, I don't know how to answer, because there is the wishful thinking where everything will be better. But when you look at things, I'm questioning, like, if privacy will even be a thing in 5 years from now, because it's so easy to grab data, and that data is now everywhere. Like, what does it mean? Will we need to handle data assuming it's already out there? Like, how much can we actually protect? How much? And we haven't even started talking about like nation state hacking, you know, because when a nation state starts to hack companies, they won't give up until they get in. You know, there's a soldier over there and changing shifts, and they're going to continuously do, if they need to like break into a bank, they can do it. They can keep on doing it for years until they get it right. So nothing stops them. It's not an economical decision. So when you look at, you know, if our data sits in social media or banks, and you now include into the mix nation states, like, is our data really protected? Can we even, is it realistic to assume that we can get to a better point? Do we need to change the way we think about data altogether and just assume it's out there? And how do we handle it from here? So I don't know. Like, I wish we can protect it. For sure, we can make it. Right now, we're at a point where we have an advantage. There are just, you know, if you are educated about it, the cyber criminal will probably move to the next person, unfortunately, because the economics doesn't make sense.
The nature.
To you. But in 5 years from now, when sophistication grows, so I don't have an answer. It's just, it's a hard.
It's a mind, and I get it. I mean, it's a mind bending thought, and one I always like to have, because I think you're right that there's a romantic view, and then there's probably a realistic view, and there's also the element of the unknown, like the way the conversations we have today versus 5 years ago on cyber risk are just fundamentally different. Data
will change. I think how people will look at data will change. Even look at the pandemic right now. You know, people, you know, we had privacy, now people talking about tracking. So things happen, and things, you know, and things change. So how well that data will be protected? And I know there's a sea of data out there, billions of records already out. Our data has been, you know, probably hacked. So it's really about, and forget about fake news. You know, think about fake news. What's interesting about fake news is that you don't even have to hack a company. You can just claim you have their data. And you can change perception. You can change economies. So, like, the fact that people claim they have my data may be enough. So
it is, and
it's a tool. Fake news is a tool. If you're competing with someone and they lie about you all day long, they lie about you, and people believe them, what are you going to do? Are you going to be like, they're lying if you want to win the race, or you're going to start lying on them? You know, you're going to start lying back because you want to win the race.
Fighting fire with fire, isn't it?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, everybody will be lying. Again, I don't want to be gloomy. I just honestly don't know. I think things will change. A lot of innovation will happen that I cannot foresee right now, but there will be a shift in how we look at data.
I think what's very interesting is that the current situation, or the DNA based on the current landscape that we operate in electronically, digitally, it's possible, from what I'm reading, from what you're saying, that you feel that it could be that fundamentally flawed, that we have to completely move to a different way of doing things, much like when we went from steam engines to the combustion engine. Like there has to be a fundamental shift.
Even it's like an open source, right? Like, companies used to say, our IP is our code. And then
source code was oil, wasn't it?
And then companies started to do open source, and they still do well. So I don't know, maybe the concept of open source data, go figure.
I think it's a bigger topic for probably for another day. But I definitely think that
this is a philosophical,
Well, there's just so many variables to it, but that it is a very interesting topic, because a lot of it is dependent on consumer adoption as well. So if everybody, the reason that social networks are now involved in selling so much data, mishandling so much data, and affecting government polls, is because that's where people have lent towards
Yeah.
and started using. That wasn't nobody, the shift in essence. So whatever whatever people lean towards as a communication, the sad thing is corporations will always try and manipulate it off the back end, and the bad actors will always try and sort of
Look, people want a frictionless solution, right? So you can see that companies want to lean towards what customers want. So adding sometimes security, or regulation adds friction in some cases. So you see platforms like TikTok, for example, that may not need to comply with different type of regulations. And over there, you can see kids going there and they're not going to other places because those places lock them down. But so if YouTube is going to lock down everything, then the problem is it's a safer solution, maybe, but the problem is that people will go to the place that is insecure. So what do you do now?
Yeah.
Maybe insurance will be the solution. Maybe people will just take that risk and just outsource it. They may say, you know what? I don't know how to handle this anymore. Companies like you may be insured. I don't know how you guys are going to handle it when people's data is.
I mean, certainly the way we're handling it is that it's certainly a monetary remuneration. So it definitely falls onto the remuneration side. If, as you say, somebody had tried to, if you were fraudulent or duped out of money and you were at a financial loss. But I think more importantly, we do a lot of checks and balances around your ID to see if we can see, or if we're aware of people opening accounts at different financial institutions under your children's names, then we would make you aware of that. But that's only one part of it. I think that the bigger picture for us is to what you're touching on is about trying to be there independently for them. So TikTok, clearly, if they're not charging you and they're worth billions, they're clearly doing something with the information that they're capturing on you.
Yeah.
Corporations that are selling you something are trying to store as much information as they can because they want to sell you something else. So if it's free, they're capturing as much data on it so they can sell your data or your profile or your habits. If they're charging you for it and it's a commerce platform, then the likelihood is they're going to try and capture as much on you to try and sell you something else. Amazon and Facebook being very obvious profiles of that. So what we feel there's a need for is an independent solution that does none of that, but clearly solely is there to look out for your and your loved one's digital well-being through as many spectrums as there are of risk online. And that is both part financial, that is both part monitoring, but there's both part education, and there's also a part of instant response when something happens. And we hope that the time is right, the landscape is only getting worse, and we can launch a product really that fits that void, but also that combats the current landscape that we're on and reduces the negative situation that people are finding themselves in. That's holistically what we're trying to create, and that's the Cyberman goal product in a nutshell. But I think, like, just as we move into, so we're sort of running up on time now, but I think the future will be very interesting on where it goes. And I think citizen and human interaction within the digital space is what does steer a lot of this on the risk, the reward, the informed person versus a non-informed person. And we just hope that these sort of conversations bring about awareness, helps people understand more about the landscape that they're in. Hopefully we can continue to innovate.
Maybe in the future, identities will be something that are temporary. You never know,
Yeah, we do. So we definitely look at we've spoke to and we are currently speaking to a number of possible partners, and we definitely anonymizing or having anonymized profiles in front of your actual profile is something that we think we could definitely, like you say, it's a bit like a proxy, really. It's definitely a, yeah, I could see that. I could see that working.
Yeah. You know, sort of like Bitcoin, the money is out there, your bank information is out there, but your identity is, you know, is not known. So maybe if the data is stolen, but nobody knows how to associate that data with an identity,
Yeah.
maybe it's less of a problem. I don't know.
No, and I think it is because our biggest issue, because we insure corporations who store lots of information, and one of our biggest concerns when assessing a risk is what do they store, how do they store it, mainly, and the amount they store, mainly because it's wanting to know what we have to do in the event that they lose it or it gets mishandled, which is highly likely if it's hacked or compromised. But it would be far easier if we could just say, well, we inform the user, like a cross-reference ID, that this ID on their anonymized profile has been compromised. So they're now to discount that ID because that one's done, and then they just use this other set of IDs. That would be very logical. You could do that across, you could do that across a lot of levels. And as you say, because at the minute, it's like not having a front door. It's like not having any locks on your house. You just give everybody, when you sign up, exactly where you are, exactly what you do, you know, like there's so much identity that they glean from you and they use that for verification. So it's certainly something that we're looking at very closely. And I want to take the time to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a fascinating conversation, and one I look forward to picking up with you in the future.
Awesome.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much
much for having me.
You're very welcome. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gabriel. Bye.